Good evening. Welcome to Expat Insights. I'm your host Raju Mandhyan. Here at Expat Insights, we take external views of internal successes by foreigners, expats, and immigrants who have made Philippines their home. Tonight, we have a very special honor because we have today somebody who's known in the country as the prophet of boom, and he has been inspiring, touching the lives of Filipinos for the longest time. He is a graduate of De La Salle, and he did his PhD at Harvard when he was just 24. And he's been teaching, helping, researching, and somehow adding value to this country for the longest time. My mentor and my professor in the past, Dean Dr. Bernardo Villegas of the University of Asia Pacific, to talk to us, especially to us expats, about Filipino values yesterday, today and tomorrow, so that we can live in this country much more happily and much more productively. Sir, welcome to Expat Insights.
Thank you very much, Raju. I'm glad to be here.
It's a great honor, and I have no idea where to start asking you questions from, but perhaps you could start with defining what is value for our audience. What's a value, or what are values?
Well, value can be interpreted either as a human virtue, like integrity, humility.
Yes, sir.
That is encrusted in the culture of a nation. Through the years, because of family, child-rearing practices, because of schools, because of institutions giving the right example, these virtues have already been incorporated into society's mainstream. So that's one way of understanding value, I feel that. But sometimes value can also have a negative connotation. It may mean wrong practices, vices that unfortunately through the years have been incorporated into a culture, like a culture of death, a culture of corruption. So it's possible that some societies suffer from these wrong values. But when I talk about values, I always prefer to talk about the positive sense, virtues, human virtues that have been incorporated into the culture of
an organization
society.
or a community.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, Filipino values. We are here today to talk about Filipino values so that expats who watch the show or Filipinos who need a little revival of their values, how are they different compared to, say, rest of Asia or rest of the world? How are they different or similar? Can you give us a picture?
Let me take off from now this famous slogan of our tourism department. It's more fun in the Philippines.
Yeah.
You know, year in and year out, there are international institutions that measure the so-called happiness index
Of countries.
of countries.
Yeah.
And the Philippines usually is on top.
Stands up happy, yeah.
Exactly. And definitely, it's very clear that Filipinos are among the happiest people in the world, not because of wealth. They're among the poorest in Asia.
Yeah.
Not because of a lot of people living integrity, because there's so much corruption here. But how do we explain this happiness that exists in the majority of Filipinos? I would explain it with the first value that I see in which we stand out, which is strong family ties. Makapamilya.
Makapamilya.
We have preserved through tradition, through the upbringing of our children, and through our faith, the truth that the family is the basic unit of society, and that we're doing everything possible to protect it from disintegration, as has happened in many other societies.
So that's you're saying that is the core value that of all the Filipino values. We'll talk about a few more.
Exactly.
Is one about looking after, nurturing, cultivating, and staying together with the family. That's the core.
Exactly.
So thus we believe a lot more in collectivism rather than individualism, because a family is a collective organization, 5, 3, 4 or more.
Oh, but that's a distinction.
Yeah.
We believe in the family as a unit, and definitely we want our family intact. For example, the Philippines has one of the lowest rate of separation of couples, one of the lowest rate of single mothers, one in the world. I'm talking about the world.
Globally, okay.
Yeah, one of the lowest rates in the world of children who don't know even their father, which is a very big problem in the United States, especially in some segments of their society, you know. So in that way, we would be what you call collectivist in thinking of ourselves as a member of family. But that also has its disadvantage.
It has its downsides.
Because we are so family-oriented that we may act many times in favor of the family, but we do not consider, in many instances, the common good of society. And that's where corruption comes in. You know, we enrich ourselves just to favor the family, but we steal from the government, we don't pay taxes, and so that is the lack of a common good orientation, and this is one of the defects that I would like all of us to fight against.
To mitigate the challenge that, hey, family is more than just a unit of 5.
Exactly.
It could be a unit of 95 million or 100 million Filipinos.
Yes.
So we need to regard that. No? So post makapamilya, no? What is the second guiding value for us Filipinos? I sorry, I say ASEAN.
Yes. Well, I think it is really an offshoot of this closely knit family. It's our virtue of always being optimistic, of always looking at the fact that the glass may be half empty, but we rather focus on its being half filled. And you see smiling faces in the Philippines more frequently than in many other societies. And in fact, you even see smiles in the most distressful situations.
This optimism is
hope
a
and optimism.
higher.
Yes.
So family followed by optimism is
That's right.
number 2, no?
Yes.
Many times, I have been in this country for 30 years and I have been a student for 12 or 13 years now, no? I have come across expats who come from Europe or from US, and they have a different mindset about how people should behave. They're concerned that we are not assertive enough. We are not aggressive enough, or we are not task-oriented enough. How do you perceive that, given that Filipino is a happy person, a family-oriented person, and also an optimistic person? How do we kind of strike a balance between the needs of the global culture and us?
Well, I think this is a question of leadership. The same Filipino who may be perceived as lacking initiative and lacking creativity,
drive,
if managed by a good leader, can be transformed overnight. In fact, I always reflect on the comparisons that are being made in the Philippines and these tiger economies like South Korea, Singapore. You know, when I was a student of economics in the 60s, my focus was development economics. And do you know what we read about South Korea at the time when it was still under Syngman Rhee? And when Singapore was just part of Malaysia, and Lee Kuan Yew was beginning to lead,
take power.
You'll be surprised at the literature. The South Koreans were described in literature as the laziest creatures on earth.
The laziest?
Yes,
the laziest.
As laid back.
Today they are Samsung and Hyundai.
As corrupt.
And
they just made a transformation. Why? Because they were lucky enough to have a Park Chung-hee who started creating a culture that made Koreans a lot more work-oriented, a lot more patriotic. The same thing with Lee Kuan Yew. I mean, the Singaporeans of the 50s and the 60s, in fact, Lee Kuan Yew himself were complaining how the Singaporeans were so lazy, and not to mention Mahathir, who wrote, in fact, a book called Malay Dilemma, that was banned in Malaysia because it described the Bumiputras as a hopeless people. So my point is, the Filipinos can be either laid back, not aggressive enough, or the opposite, depending on how they are managed by their leaders.
So currently, you're saying in the last 30, 40 years, in the 60s, it's our leadership that has been of question. And we need to change that. And so let's bring it to today, sir. And we're coming to a break in 1 minute, no? But how are we doing today? What is our point of view today? Where are we going? Do you think there's good change coming in the coming years?
Oh, definitely. I'm very positive about the outlook of today because we have the right leader in Malacanang. He is setting the right example, especially in the area of fighting corruption. And then we have many, many leaders in the private sector, especially in private enterprises, that are making Filipinos among the most productive workers in the world.
Thus, they are coming to the fore and now expressing what is true, authentic, and constructive for the country.
Exactly.
Okay, sir. Let's take a little break, and we'll come back and go in depth about what is happening today from the perspective of Filipino values. So stay with us. We are with Dr. Bernardo Villegas, and we are talking about Filipino values yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We'll come back and talk to him a bit more on the same subject matter. This is Expert in Science. I'm your host, Raju, and please stay with us. Well, welcome back to Expert Insights. I'm your host, Raju, and we are talking to Dr. Bernardo Villegas, and we are talking about Filipino values. And we'll ask him a couple of questions about the very popular pop values known as, sir, Bahala Na, or the He of the Philippines. What are the pros and cons of just Bahala Na, for example?
Well, this phrase is part of the stock language of some sociologists with whom I disagree. Saying these are Filipino values. They will be surprised.
Bahala na is not.
Bahala na, not worrying about the future and just leaving things. These are Nigerian values. These are Pakistani values. These are values of populations which are still emerging from a rural agrarian community to an industrial culture. Because in rural community, you don't have to think about, what do I do tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, etc., etc. You depend on the weather. And many things you cannot control. And so, Bahala na means, well, God will decide.
Bahala means, it means
let God decide.
Very fatalistic.
But that's not Filipino. That's a culture that is widespread in societies that are predominantly agrarian. That's why I smile every time I read some of the sociology saying, oh, pakikisama, utang na loob, etc. These are cultural traits of countries that are predominantly agrarian and are still very poor. You don't expect them to start using, iPads and iPods to plan their lives for the next day,
Right, sir.
So, I definitely would caution managers about listening to the sociologists about these values being Filipino values. They are universal values of countries transitioning from economic backwardness to higher per capita income.
Thus, when a man on the street says, Bahala ka na, thus he is not coming from being a Filipino, he is coming from an influence of societies.
From his economic and social standing.
How about the value, or not even the value, or the grace of being shy, or being polite, or being kind of, hiya, the word hiya?
No, I would consider that, and that's the valid thing about something that distinguishes us from other Asian cultures. But us, I mean Malays. Malays, you find, are very eager to keep smooth interpersonal relations with others. So they make sure that they're not very aggressive in their approach. They're not confrontational.
Not very direct,
etc. Just to pull your leg. The Indians are exactly the opposite. They're very argumentative. In fact, there was a book.
That's why I'm here in this chair.
No, I say this with scientific backing because one of my favorite economists, Amartya Sen, who is a Nobel Prize winner, precisely wrote a bestseller called The Argumentative Indian. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of your heritage also. You're always trying to, go against.
I hope I don't do that.
No, you're already sufficiently Filipinized, no?
I'm sufficiently Filipinized,
But, so that is a correct observation. But it's not only Filipino. That's Indonesia.
Yeah.
That's the Bumiputras in Malaysia. They always try to avoid confrontation.
But as,
yeah.
as what you're saying, as a natural Filipino, we are quite candid. You're saying that? And this is an external influence?
No, I don't think the Filipino is candid in general.
Yeah.
Only those who are westernized, you know, they would only imitate the Americans, you know, who will call a spade a spade. But generally, a Filipino, even at the highest level, is still very careful about not confronting others with something opposite their opinion, no? So, but again, that can be viewed as either an asset. For example, we did not have a bloody EDSA revolution because of our ability precisely to keep smooth interpersonal relations.
Peaceful and
yes, exactly.
calm, yeah?
You know, this is a very interesting study because the word amok is a Malay word. A Malay word.
Yeah, I didn't know
Yes,
that, yeah.
it was not in the original Shakespearean English.
I wouldn't know, okay.
The English discovered amok.
Yeah.
Now, this reflects a phenomenon in which a Malay, whether Filipino, Indian, or Malayan, can be very patient, stomaching all sorts of abuse for years and years because of this desire to keep a front of, you know, peacefulness. But there comes a point when he snaps and he kills everyone inside. That's why he runs amok. There's equivalent word in Scandinavia, berserk.
Berserk.
Yeah, berserk. So that is a sociological phenomenon, and we could have run amok in EDSA, like they ran amok in Indonesia when Sukarno's regime was ending and they killed thousands of Chinese. When they ran amok in Malaysia, when they killed in the racial riots thousands of Chinese.
We've never had so many.
We've never had that because how do you explain that? Why did our amokness not come to life?
Not explode out.
The explanation is Christianity. Take a look at EDSA. Who were there in front?
The nuns,
priests, Our Lady of Fatima, etc. So the combination of our smooth interpersonal relations approach, which we share with other Asians, but Christianized, make us generally a peaceful people.
So given this nature of Philippines, you know, this little cultural which you're saying is much more authentic, much more original rather than the ones that are superficial today absorbed from other cultures, how should expats, foreigners that are now investing in the Philippines or dealing and trading with the Philippines, what are the few suggestions that you would recommend that Mr. Smith, John Smith from the USA, employs when he deals with us?
Yes. Well, I'm glad you asked that.
Yeah, I need that. Yes, I need to know that.
Because before we started this, I told you about Hitachi, Philippines, and about a manager by the name of Chandra. He's an expat. He's an Indian from Malaysia. And the first advice that I would give, precisely learning from example, is an expat should give the highest priority to helping the employees have a very stable family. To really look for all sorts of ways, whether to the wages, to the fringe benefits, of strengthening the Filipino family. Because the Filipino is going to be most grateful to employers who help them make their family intact.
So key one is that I, as a manager, as a leader of the company, have in mind the small unit that my colleague respects a lot as a priority, and then give him everything or get the best out of that person. So that should be my incentive for him, that I'm loving your family as much as you love him.
For example,
key one.
Very down-to-earth examples. Chandra of Hitachi realized that a good number of his employees, just because of lack of financial means, never got married. They were just live-ins. And definitely that situation can be a liability. They cannot even get certain types of legal protection because
they can't hold the state together.
Well, what he did was to organize mass weddings that he paid for. He got the Catholic priest, and there you had something like 400.
Like the ones that done in Luneta,
Exactly. But he did that, and they were so grateful. And they said, you don't even have to spend, because part of the reason why people don't get married is, oh, maghahanda,
Yeah.
mahal-mahal, gagastos.
Yeah.
Says, you don't have to do that. The company will do that. Second, he realized that a good number of his middle executives never completed their bachelor's degree because of financial problem. So he teamed up with some universities and asking the Commission on Higher Education to give classes right in the company. And just a few months ago, they had a graduation of people getting their Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering, Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering. And you can imagine, there's another thing. The Filipino family gives the highest priority to education.
It does.
And
That's why we have such high. So second question, in my daily dealings, as a CEO, that's a good strategy for me to think of my workers' family and also be able to provide the right incentives for that.
Exactly.
But how about daily interactions? Because I come from a perspective of tasks, jobs, discipline, go by the book. But from the Filipino perspective, there's more to it. So how do I handle them? How do
the Filipino can be as task-oriented and as docile to managers as any other worker. In fact, let me just cite, when Motorola was very, very active here, because of the corporate culture that Motorola had, they proved to the rest of the world that Filipino workers were the most productive in Asia. They had yearly Olympics on productivity. And the Filipino workers always got the gold medal compared to the Taiwanese, to the Malaysians.
They were multiculturals there.
Exactly. I mean, the way comparing their operations in Malaysia, their operations in Taiwan. And the Filipino workers always came out. So, given the right leaders and especially the right corporate culture that is imbued in a corporation, Filipino workers can be as productive as any Asian worker.
Good. Sir, now you mentioned that today we are on the right track as a country and the leadership is of the country is on the right track. No? How do you foresee the future, the economic future of this country, based on the fact that we are on the right track spiritually and by values?
Well, they call me the prophet of boom.
Right.
And this time, I really am a prophet of boom. I think starting this year, we have reached a tipping point when we will start growing at rates comparable to India, Vietnam, if not China, meaning 7 to 9% every year of GDP for the next 10 to 20 years.
And this is in all sectors, whether it's service, industry,
of course.
manufacturing.
I mean, that will be the average. There will be some that will be growing faster, like BPO is growing at 15% every year. So, but the average of all of this will be about 7 to 9%, which is what every developing country needs for 20 years in order to eradicate poverty. So finally, we have a chance.
But can you explain that? Why 20 years?
Because if you have a poverty incidence of close to 30% of your population going to bed hungry, before you can really reach everyone in the so-called grassroots, you need time. I mean, even China has been growing at 12, 11% for the last 20 years, and only 400 million of their 1.3 billion have really benefited. Now I say only, that's quite a feat, 400 million. But you still have 900 million who are going to bed hungry every night. But it's a matter of time.
What about, that's in the BPO and the service sector, what about our manufacturing and trade of goods globally? How are we going to start?
Well, manufacturing in the Philippines is very strong in food and beverage. So it's not a coincidence that the biggest corporations are San Miguel, Rubina, all of these, because they produce for the local market. And it's very difficult for outsiders to penetrate the local market. For logistics, especially if you have 7,000 islands to worry about. So manufacturing in food and beverage will always be very vibrant here. Now, there are areas in manufacturing, high value, that are now beginning to be competitive. Because China, that used to be monopolizing manufacturing, is already suffering from labor shortages and constant increases in their wages. So the days of cheap labor in China are over. And that was compounded by their one-child policy. So they have fewer and fewer people in their labor force.
Yet we see China as an emerging power economically and socially.
Yes.
Given the fact that they're losing ground.
Yes. But
yeah.
the greatest advantage of China is their domestic market. So you now have 400 million rich and middle income Chinese who will buy all the types of consumer products you can think of that will make China the most attractive consumer market in the world. You know, just think about it.
Yeah.
400 million consumers who can buy anything that a modern consumer would buy. That's bigger than the U.S. economy
and
already.
certain other countries put together.
Exactly.
What are your recommendations for small, medium businessmen today? Given that things are going to look brighter starting now, and the growth is going to be anywhere from 7 to 9%, how do you recommend that I, as a businessman, ride the wave? What are your strategies?
Well, there are two favorite sectors of mine that I would encourage SMEs to look at.
Yeah.
First, in agriculture, high-value crops that can be grown in a farm of 1 to 2 hectares. If you start growing sweet papaya, honeydew melon, all of these types of agricultural products that middle-class people are increasingly buying. They eat less rice as they have more money because they're told that it's more healthy to eat. Well, this will be in great demand by the millions of kilos. No? So that's the first thing. People who have properties still that were exempted from the Agrarian Reform Program, and there are a lot of these people, they should go into high-value agriculture. Second, in tourism, I would suggest that a lot of people start putting up bed and breakfast facilities all over the country. A typical tourist, whether domestic or foreign, when he goes to Dumaguete or to Camiguin or to all these very nice places, forget Boracay, you know. They don't want to stay in a Marriott or an Intercon. They want to stay
about 10,000 pesos. Yeah.
They want to stay in an equivalent of what it really makes European tourism click. Small
$50.
Yes, $50, but these are small, either in Spain, because I live in Spain, small old palaces and convents that have been converted into hotels that can offer, let's say, 5 to 10 rooms. You just need a clean toilet and clean bed and just breakfast.
So this kind of businesses or this kind of investments don't require a large capital.
Definitely not.
Yeah. For the fruits, etc., companies like Dole and Del Monte already have an edge on the rest of the country. But the other ones, there's a lot of opportunity for bigger and smaller corporations.
Of course, yes. Well, in the hospitality industry, you see, for example, restaurants cropping up all over Manila.
Yeah.
Just take a look at what's happening in Glorieta and all these places. Every time you have new restaurants. And, of course, there's always the closing down of some of them that fail, but always they're replaced by others. The whole hospitality industry, which is tourism, will be an opportunity for a lot of SMEs to flourish.
Currently, there are two things that are very scary for global economics, and probably they might impact the Philippines. Number one is the state of the Eurozone and the state of oil prices. What is your position, and how will that affect us here in the Philippines?
My view is the oil prices going up are again temporary, exactly like what happened in 2007. They went up to 140, then they collapsed to 40. I think the collapse will come because those who depend on oil will definitely produce a lot of oil when they see Iran and others suffering from oil reduction.
What is our position? What's our position on consumption of oil and energy?
Well, believe it or not, the Philippines is on top of the world in terms of the balance of its sources of energy.
Self-sufficiency towards...
It's amazing. Not everyone really realizes this. Our dependence on oil for producing energy has been brought down from 95% in the 1970s to 10% today, thanks to geothermal, thanks to natural gas, thanks to hydroelectric. We have been one of the most successful in diversifying our energy sources. And, well, that's at least one thing that I can attribute to the right thing done during the Marcos regime.
Thus you're saying that whatever fears exist about the prices of oil will not affect us so much, and we should just go on with business as usual, regardless of what might happen.
Exactly. That's why I've been very active in helping push the so-called private-public partnership projects, because a lot of them have to do with energy. A lot of them have to do with...
For example, so could you cite an example?
Well, for example, the biggest U.S. energy firm, it's called AES, bought a 600 megawatt plant in Masinloc, Zambales, and was so happy with this investment that now it wants to add another 600 megawatt. So these are the types of investments that are occurring, but side by side with these are smaller projects of 1 to 2 megawatts that other groups are trying to do in what are known as the off-grid islands that cannot be connected to the national grid. And
that can be.
That cannot be, because precisely they're islands in which you just provide for the need of 2 megawatts coming either from a small hydro project or a small biomass project where you use agricultural waste. So these are the two areas in energy investments that are happening.
And Eurozone?
Eurozone, fortunately, we are not that dependent on Europe for our markets. In fact, China has now a larger share in our exports than the whole of Europe.
Yeah. Sir, we'll be coming to a break in about 3 minutes, but I understand you just came back from the U.S.
Yes.
And what good news do you bring from the U.S.? What are the possibilities of expansion and growth between us?
The good news is we're back on the radar screen of American investors.
Even though America is not so happy with its current economy.
On the contrary, precisely because they are not foreseeing a bullish American economy, the moneyed people in America want an alternative site to invest.
Right.
And the Philippines is one of them.
So what's the good news? What is coming here?
The good news is in all the cities where we're in, Washington, New York, and San Francisco, there were so many American corporations that want to come here to build bridges, to build airports, to build a logistics hub in Clark, to go into BPO. And in fact, they're completely neglecting or ignoring what Obama said in his State of the Nation address, that he would stop the outsourcing. He says that is a pipe dream. That will never happen.
Right.
Because American corporations are the first ones to say, you want us to survive? Let us cut our costs by subcontracting.
Sige, sir, let's take a break and we'll come back and talk to you a little bit more about how Filipinos should now manage or deal with expats in this country, and also be able to make advantage of the fact that we are going to be a growing economy. I have a little special guest here, is a young Filipino business person who's going to be joining us, and maybe she'll ask you questions from her perspective. So
wonderful.
Stay with us. So stay with us. We are talking to Dr. Bernie Villegas, and we are talking about Filipino values today, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. This is Expat Insights, and we'll come right back after the break. Good evening. Welcome back to Expat Insights. I'm your host, Raju Mandhyan, and now we have a surprise guest with Dr. Bernie Villegas, a young entrepreneur, Filipina, and she is the future of the Philippines. Thus, she is here today to ask Sir Bernie what the future looks like from her perspective. Her name is Trixie Esguerra, and she runs a business called Wrap It Up. And Trixie, welcome to Expat Insights, and I hope we have some good questions for Sir Bernie here.
Good evening,
What's your
Trixie.
number one question, Trixie?
Well,
this is evening, that's correct, sir.
Yeah, as I was listening to your conversations a while ago, I just can't help but I feel like I have so much passion. I don't know what other businesses to put up.
Yeah.
So, well, one question is that for the youth of today, those who are the future, what business would you recommend for them to get into, which is gonna, of course, gonna be booming in the next 5-10 years?
Very good question, and I would definitely focus on what this document called Arrancada calls the creative industries.
Yeah.
Modesty aside, we Filipinos are among the most creative Asians.
Yeah.
In every possible area where creativity is needed. fashion, animation, graphics,
Yeah.
singing. You know, there is no hotel or cruise liner in the world that does not have a Filipino singer or guitarist
Yeah.
or band. And so this is definitely an area where young people would enjoy not only making money, but actually doing the thing of
So
entertaining.
besides farms, small farms,
Yes.
besides boutique hotels and
Yes.
stuff like that,
Yes.
you're saying the areas of fun, fashion, and food.
Exactly.
Three, and
Yes.
entertainment, no?
Yes.
Is entertainment big for us globally?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, without really any effort on the part of our government, we already have the likes of Charis Pempenko being discovered
Yeah.
in world entertainment.
Yeah.
And I always say there are hundreds of Charis Pempenko still to be discovered, no? And so my view, for example, is if you people in the creative industry team up with Koreans because they have all the money, they're very good in producing telenovelas.
Right.
As you know, we are
Right.
consuming
Maybe.
Korean telenovelas. And especially now.
I've never watched any. I have
Well,
watched
you better
the-
They're
watch.
addicting.
You better watch because a certain Grace Lee may be our
Oh.
first lady. No, so it's a perfect combination between the Filipino
Filipino.
and the Koreans. No, but kidding aside, with all due respect to the president, no, I've
Yeah.
always been saying, if the Koreans and the Filipinos get together in the field of entertainment, we will conquer the world.
What about Bollywood? What
Bollywood,
about Shah Rukh Khan?
again, let
Aishwarya
me pull his
Rai.
leg because
It's
we're
my
having
bias,
fun.
my
We're,
bias.
we're, we're having fun right now, no?
Yeah.
Indians have very little creativity. The only thing they do is sway, sway, sway,
Cut
and
that
sing,
part
sing,
out.
sing.
Cut that part out. Okay.
So I think, no, objectively speaking,
Mhm.
the Filipino historical roots, because
Mhm.
we have been exposed to the most varied of
Yeah.
cultural practices. Spanish, American, Japanese. We've had a lot of Indians here coming.
Lots of
Chinese.
Hollywood, yeah.
This is the most multicultural that you can find in any part of the world.
Mhm.
And creativity requires this type of experience.
This combination,
Yes.
this synergy between the.
Who, for example, are producing all the cartoons for the Japanese anime? Who are the people producing the cartoons for Walt
The
Disney?
Philippine Graphics Association.
Filipinos.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and these are types of businesses that can be put up with little capital. You can just start with a computer and at home do all of the necessary
Just your
graphics.
skills.
Yeah.
Then
Exactly.
there
Sir,
you go.
about the size of businesses, unless, Trixie, do you want to ask something? I want to ask you the size of businesses, no? Is the future for 10,000 employees, or is the future made out for 500, 300 employee organizations? Because as a country, you and I know this, that 90% of our businesses are small to medium, no?
Yes.
But where does the future lie? What is the most ideal business to create? 300, 3,000?
The future is in SME.
Yeah.
Our model should be the European continent, where the vast majority of successful businesses are still family, small organizations. So,
Eh,
I mean, the big companies in Europe are the exception.
Mhm.
98, 99% of their firms are still small
Globally,
businesses.
globally.
Europe. I'm
Oh,
referring to Europe.
Europe.
I'm referring to Europe.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Is that
yes,
true too? Yeah.
definitely.
Uh-huh.
Europe is the example of a continent where SMEs still predominate.
Yeah. One of the countries that's been most talked about during the last few years, financial crisis and the fact that countries are not growing. Germany has been stable.
Yes.
Germany has always retained its potential to grow. And
Correct.
it's still poised
Still.
to grow powerfully.
Yes.
What are they doing right that we in the Philippines can employ or emulate?
You have hit the nail on the head.
I thank God, man.
Germany is the model country for the capitalism that will survive in the 21st century.
What are the essential-
Because
yeah.
they were able to obtain a very beautiful balance between free enterprise, markets,
Yeah.
and the responsibility of the state to take care of the poorest of the poor and the underprivileged.
Right,
You know,
right.
American capitalism did not succeed
Mhm.
in that regard. As you know, 15% now
Yeah.
of Americans still go to bed hungry.
That's
And-
a sad thing.
And,
yeah.
and that is a scandal in the most powerful economy in the world. Why? Because they went too much to the extreme of Milton Friedman, that the only business of business is to make a profit. And in fact, it's very ironical that some Republicans, with whom I do not agree, even call Obama a communist because he wants to provide Medicare for the poor. That's not being a communist, that's being responsible. And so Germany was able to combine those two important factors of society, the freedom of individual initiative and responsibility of the state to take care of the underprivileged. And that's why Germany is now what I refer to as the Santa Claus in Europe. Every country in trouble is, please bail us out, bail us out, bail us out.
Thus, how do we balance here? If we are poised for growth, what do we take? What are the essential elements of Germany's strategy?
We must continue supporting the effort of
the
President Aquino to clean up the state, to make it more efficient, so that it can come to the support of the poorest of the poor and the underprivileged. Because,
Trixie, did you want to ask something?
Yes, well, I just wanted to say that that's really one of the, well, just last year, well, I've always wanted to stay in the Philippines and do business. But just last year, of course, you'd get a little, thoughts of, what if I just go abroad? And, but then with how the administration is going right now, with all this that I hear from you, I just feel like I really have to do something. It's more of responsibility that I have to give, of course, work to other Filipinos. And, I feel that I can just do anything.
You're inspired to stay.
Yes, very much.
Sir, I have two questions. This is a question I don't ever ask at Expat Insights about what's going on in the current state of the economy. There is something happening at the Senate, and my point of view before I met you was that it's a lot of investment in terms of man-hours, finding out what is happening. What is your stand? You mentioned that there's a cornerstone of bursting corruption. Can you explain what is happening in the state quickly?
Well, first of all, let me say that whatever is happening in the Senate has very little impact on the economy. The economy will have its own source of growth. It's just actually a side entertainment. As it's called Coronovela, because it's like a telenovela.
But the outcome of it, the end, long term.
I think it is a necessary evil, this waste of resources that you are referring to, because it is a very important part of the struggle of the president to fight corruption.
To clean up.
Because if the theory, and I'm not in any way siding with one side or the other, if the theory is the Supreme Court is loaded with people who will always decide to acquit people of the past of charges of corruption, then we will never be able to demonstrate to the population that if you commit a crime, you are punished.
Does the effort lies in making it a robust and an honest judiciary system? That
definitely, definitely.
Okay.
Yes.
So one more question. People like Trixie out here, and we are becoming a flatter society, a lot of mixed society. How do they deal? What are your tips on they, coming from Filipino values, deal with old, burned out expats like me? What are your recommendations? Because usually I'm sure they have from their perspective also, how do I deal with this person? What are your recommendations?
I don't understand the question. How do I deal with one person?
Filipinos nowadays in BPOs, young Filipinos who are now dealing with the rest of the world. Their challenge is that how do I put across my message, my values? How do I retain my values and still be able to converse and get the best out of this interaction? What are your recommendations?
Well, first of all, they have to make sure that they're firmly rooted in all these family values, and especially their faith. Because their faith, whatever it is, Muslim, Christian, is a foundation for character formation. And so, as long as they don't succumb, and this is definitely a danger that we're addressing with the industry, to drug addiction, to HIV/AIDS exposure, etc., they can benefit from the advantages of this very bullish industry and retain the values that we were talking about.
That's your tip for them. Okay, sir. So thank you very much for being on this show. We are about to wrap up. And if you have any final words for my community, the foreigners, the expats, the Pute, the Bombays, if there's something you want to tell them and give them a little your words of wisdom for them.
Yes. Well, probably my parting words would be, I've talked about a lot of our strengths, but as I said already in our conversation, Our weakness is generally the Filipino is
Yeah.
still too clan-oriented
Yeah.
and does not think of the common good.
Right.
And that's why I would like to ask the expat community
Yeah.
to please help in nurturing
Yeah.
in their employees
Yeah.
and in their customers
Mm.
this ability to promote the good of others
Yeah.
without expecting anything in return.
So
And
almost the same thing that you said in the beginning of the show.
exactly, because
Yeah.
for example, especially Japanese are some of the best employers
Yeah.
who can show us, for example, what happened in Japan
Mhm.
during the earthquake. You know, it's amazing how they, for
They
example,
recovered.
never took advantage of people. They would go supermarket. They would, when there was a blackout, they would put back the goods to the shelf.
Mm.
There was no tooting of the horn at all.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing how Japanese culture was able to inculcate the idea.
Look at the bigger
that
picture.
Think of the welfare of others, not only yours and your family. Now,
Right.
that is one thing we can definitely benefit from exposure to expats.
All right, so thank you very much for being on this show.
You're welcome.
And
Yeah.
Trixie, thank you very much. I hope you
Thank
learned a
you.
bit from this.
A lot.
And well, good luck and God bless and mabuhay to all expats and Filipinos in the country. So thank you
Mabuhay.
for watching Expat Insight. That was Dr. Villegas and Trixie Esguerra on Filipino values yesterday, today, and tomorrow for us expats. Thank you for watching. Good night and mabuhay.